Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for checking out another one of my YouTube sessions in Lightroom. Today we're going to work on a landscape. We're going to leave the birds behind for a little bit, and I'd like to show you what can be done when an image has good bones. Now, obviously, we like to do everything we can to take well-exposed, beautiful images, but when it comes to the artful side of photography and processing, we don't always have to achieve perfection. And in fact, some of the flaws that we find in our images can be exploited to make really pretty images. And I often say sometimes, we make the proverbial lemonade out of lemons, particularly when the shooting conditions were not what we had hoped for. And this is certainly, one of those mornings. There were beautiful elements to this morning, and it never just really came to fruition like you would hope. But the bones are great. So, for instance, we've got some beautiful light that is starting to break through the clouds. We've got some reflection in the water. I waited for a flock of birds to take flight here, so we've got some of that going on, which adds some interest. And then it really was quite foggy this morning, so there's some neat elements here that we're going to try to take advantage of as we, as I often say, create what we wish we had seen. Now, as far as edits, I've got a whole bunch saved here, and what I like to do, I'm going to be looking at the image here in Navigator as a benchmark for what this image looks like if we were stepped back and away from it. So I do refer up here to the left quite a bit to give my eye just a little better perspective on what we're doing with light and color. So this one's really not going to be that difficult, and I probably won't work it all the way through to save time, but I will show you the general elements of what can be done and rather quickly. So if we wanted to here, there's a couple ways we can go about starting. You could start here at this light source. I often use just a freehand brush for my tool here to play with the sky, but today, since we've got it and maybe you haven't used it, we're going to use the sky tool. And this did a pretty good job of picking up what actually is the sky. Sometimes it's not always that great, but Lightroom is getting better and better with this kind of thing. So one of the things I want to look here first is to see if we can exploit the light that is coming through these clouds. So I'm going to first play with the highlights. And again, keep taking a look over here to the left and see if we can bring up some of that light that was popping through. And I don't think shadows is going to do a lot, but it's looks like we're, I don't know if I want the sky quite that bright, but we'll continually play with this. Some shadows. And we've got our blacks. You can see it gives almost a little more ominous look. But I definitely want the sky to be a focus, and we're going to want some of this water to be a focus as well. And then I'm going to come down here and see if some clarity might pop some of these clouds here in the foreground, which it did. And a dehaze. Now, dehaze to the left is going to take some detail away, and that can be good in some circumstances. But here I'm going to use it to sort of show this cloud formation and what it was really like. So we're going to leave that like this for now. And while we've got that going on, we're going to start to bring in a little bit of color. And I'm just going to bring in the slightest touch of temperature here. We're just going to warm it up. And then I may just bring in a little bit of pink. So think about all the different colors you've seen in sunrises and maybe what you wish it had looked like. So we're just going to bring in a little bit of pink there. And I may actually go a little on the saturated side because we can always come back here. Now you can go as crazy as you want with your color to get a rich tone that you want, and then bring it back with your saturation. So you can always go one direction and then bring it back in multiple ways if you feel like you've gone too far or the color is not what you wanted. But I think what we're going to do is I want this sort of violet blue color. So we've got a little bit of both now. We've got some pinky yellow down here in the middle, but this violety blue color. Let me just bring a little more of that in here. And you can see these are not big numbers, but it will make a difference in the end. But I want blue, this to be part of the image here. And then I may just look at bringing up, there we go. So now we've got some exposure working in to lighten those colors. And now I really want this center portion here. And by the way, we're going to kind of work this section, the sky section, which is sort of the 2/3 here, and then this 1/3 here. And we're going to work them a little separately. I do that probably more than I care to admit, but that's how my brain works, sort of breaking it up. All right, so for the center part of the sky, I'm going to bring in a radial gradient, and that looks like this. And I'm going to feather it out some so that the effect is somewhat soft. We don't want a hard oval. We just want to suggest the light source. And I may drop it down because I think what we're going to do is reflect some of what we do here right down into the water when we work on that second half. So here's another place that we can start to bring in some other color. So there's a suggestion of sun coming through. And we've already set up a nice outline for this with what we did with the previous sky mask. And then just going to bring in some pinks, maybe a little more gold. And that's going to suggest our sunrise coming through. And again, this is going to be very subtle. I'll show you some of my edits after, but we're going to leave this kind of subtle. Now I may come down here and actually bring in, just close the texture and clarity a little bit. This was only ISO 400, and even though it was dark, you can see we had good range here. I kept the histogram in the middle. So we don't have a lot of noise in this image. And by the way, I did shoot this at a rather high shutter speed. I wanted the gulls to be kind of crisp and clear in the image, even though they're silhouettes. And I do tend to shoot at a higher shutter speed because I know we can always fix the ISO at the end. But if I am looking to freeze something, I'm probably going to make sure that really happens and maybe even overdo it every so often. So you can see already here, if we're looking left, we've got a nice sky compared to what we had to begin with. And then I'm going to just hit return, and that will bring us back to being able to select a new mask. And I'm going to grab a linear gradient now, and we're going to work this bottom portion of the water and start to blend the sky into the whole scene with the water. So I think I might check shadows first, bring up some whites, some highlights. A lot of times I use these other sliders first before I go to exposure, just to see what kind of effect we're having here. Because I think what we want, we've got this oval that we put in here to where the sun was coming up. And I'm going to want to sort of reflect that same thing here. I'm not going to want all of this to spread across the bottom. I'm going to want to keep a concentration here to reflect what we made happen in the sky. So now we're not quite getting as bright as I'd like, so we're going to go ahead and bring up the exposure. All right. And now we're going to bring in another radial gradient. Now, one thing you could do is copy this one and just bring it into the bottom, but I'm gonna do it this way so we can show you, because I don't know that I want it to be identical, but we're just going to try to make this portion of the water have some of that color and reflection. So again, you can watch it here, and we're going to bring up some whites. So as if this guy is reflecting right onto that water. And I'm gonna go ahead and spread it out, and we're going to smudge it a little, so to speak, so you can see here. Gonna make that just a little, and just keep playing. You know, I can keep bringing it down. You can see how where we're moving the mask to is changing our water. And then may just bring even a little more exposure. There we go. Because this is a bright white, and it could definitely have been reflecting into the water. And let's see if we add just a little more warmth there. And then I may just desaturate it just a little bit. So at the end of the day, it's really whatever you think looks good. So already we've changed this quite a lot. And I think overall, now I've hit return to close down my masks. And this is a point where when I'm editing like this, I'm going to go ahead and create a snapshot, and I'm just going to call this video. But I've got to a place with my image. Now, if I were to walk away, I could always just come right back to this edit. Or if I get to any point where I don't like what I'm doing, I can just stop and come back. So sometimes I'll have lots of versions that I've created. And other times it's, you know, I get to where I am, I hit snapshot and I'm done, just to save the version that I like. Now, I think I'm gonna, there we go. So we're just gonna bring up overall some exposure. And in artful renderings like this, a lot of times a little bit of blown white is just never an issue. This isn't an image that, although I have put this image into competition for artful type competitions where we're not concerned about technical perfection. Because if you come here and step back, those whites are actually part of what's giving us the feeling of the sun coming through those clouds in early morning. So sometimes I'll leave these just as is, because I like the effect that it's giving. And then I may play. Now look what happens when we play with clarity. You really can make this look so many different ways. We can bring that clarity up. I'm probably going to leave the dehaze alone, but the texture and clarity in this image could really play a big part. You could make this look really painterly, particularly where fog is involved. So one thing you could do here, for instance, is leave this bottom portion somewhat de-texturized, so to speak, with clarity. If we've blurred this a bit, and then make this section very textured, or vice versa. You could make the bottom portion, and then we could put a mask in up top here and just bring down that texture and make this look something more oil painterly. All right. Now you can notice here we've got some the corners where we had darkness, and so I'm not gonna make that more difficult than it needs to be, and I'm just gonna crop in a little bit. All right. So that's all I'm gonna do here. I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna just make one more. And then what I'll usually do when I'm done, so I might say, video version 1, meaning for me that's a final, or I'll call it a final, you can see over here. So here are some other renderings as I was working. This is an older image, but just to show you all the different things that can be done. And they were only done with what I've just shown you. Some radial gradients, some linear gradients, playing with the tone and temperature. This is honestly one of my favorites. I kind of like that bright pastel look. And then here's the ones that we did. You can see these are a little more on the pinky tone, and these are a little more in the blue. So there are so many different options you can do here for the color tone, the brightness, the clarity, that all give this image a very artful look. But at the end of the day, I think what I really like to, the message here is never count an image out, and don't feel like we're not fixing this image. This was taken in poor light deliberately. We could very clearly see that morning that this was not going to come to fruition. So I shot the image with the idea that, hey, we can exploit some of the good that was coming from what was happening. Again, the birds, the light, the reflection here, and then we've created what we wish we have seen. So I hope maybe you'll go back to some images that were maybe shot in not the best light, because that's just what the weather gave you that day, and maybe you can make something beautiful out of it. Have a great day.